Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're embarking on a really pivotal and, frankly, quite sobering exploration.
We are. We're looking at 1 Samuel chapter 4.
Right. And it's this major historical account, this clash between the Israelites and the Philistines.
And the text really throws us right into it, doesn't it? The Israelites are already facing the Philistines, and things don't start well for them.
No, not at all. An initial defeat, about 4,000 casualties right off the bat.
Which immediately raises questions. And the text gives us a clue. It points out the Israelites kind of initiated this battle themselves.
Without checking in first.
Yeah.
Like without seeking guidance from the Lord through Samuel.
Exactly. It highlights this tendency, maybe a very human one, to act based on our own judgment, what seemed good to them at the time.
Instead of pausing to seek divine direction. And I think that resonates, doesn't it? How often do we maybe jump the gun?
Absolutely. Acting without the full picture or, without seeking that deeper counsel is a recurring theme.
So after this first defeat, the elders of Israel react. They're asking, okay, why did the Lord let this happen?
Which is a fair question, I suppose. But it's their next step that's really crucial here.
The plan.
Yes, their plan. They decide, let's go get the Ark of the Covenant from Shiloh.
Right, believing that just having the ark physically present would guarantee victory. The text says they thought, so that he may go with us and save us from our enemies.
Yeah, and notice the phrasing, so that he may go with us. They're linking God's saving presence directly, maybe even automatically, to the ark itself.
And the text makes a point of saying this was their idea, their strategy, not necessarily God's instruction.
Definitely not presented as God's instruction. It feels very much like a human solution born out of panic and maybe a misunderstanding.
Because the ark wasn't just some box, was it? It held huge significance.
Immense significance. It represented the very presence of the Lord Almighty, the one enthroned between the cherubim. It held the covenant tablets. It was the focal point of their relationship with God.
So you can understand why they want it there in a crisis.
You can understand the sentiment, yes. But the way they went about it, treating it almost like a lucky charm or a guarantee, that's where the problem lies.
And there's another complicating factor, isn't there? Who actually brings the ark?
Right. Eli's sons, Hophni and Phinehas. And these weren't exactly paragons of virtue.
No, the source points out they were disgraced. Their reputation preceded them. Their involvement itself should maybe have been a warning sign.
It really should have. I mean, having these men known for their disregard for God's laws, escorting the most sacred object, it adds another layer of wrongness to the whole situation. It wasn't just about the ark. It was about the hearts and actions of the people involved.
So the ark arrives in the Israelite camp. And the reaction is huge. Shouting, noise, the ground itself shaking, apparently.
A massive morale boost for the Israelites initially, but it also alerts the Philistines.
And how do they react? Not with contempt.
Right.
No, quite the opposite. They're afraid. Seriously afraid. They hear the shouting, figure out the ark is there, and their minds go straight back to their history lessons.
They remember Egypt.
They do. They say, a god has come into the camp, and then nothing like this has happened before. We're doomed. Who will deliver us from the hand of these mighty gods? They are the gods who struck the Egyptians with all kinds of plagues in the wilderness.
Wow. So the Philistines actually seem to have a healthy respect, or at least fear, of God's power. Maybe even more than the Israelites did in that moment.
It's a fascinating irony, isn't it? The pagans recognize the power associated with Israel's God, perhaps more clearly than the Israelites who are misusing the symbol of his presence.
But fear doesn't make them give up. The Philistine leaders rally their troops.
Yes, they counter the fear with an appeal to their pride and survival. They basically say, look, we used to dominate these Hebrews. Are we going to become their subjects now? Be strong, be men, and fight.
A classic battlefield speech. Grit your teeth and fight.
Exactly. They're tapping into that warrior spirit, reminding them what's at stake from their perspective. They don't realize the Israelites' confidence is misplaced.
So, the second battle happens. And the outcome.
It's even worse for Israel, a total disaster.
How bad?
30,000 foot soldiers lost, a staggering number.
30,000.
And the ultimate tragedy, from their perspective, the Ark of God is captured by the Philistines.
Captured. The symbol of God's presence. Gone.
And fulfilling the earlier prophecy about Eli's family, both his sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are killed in the battle.
So it's defeat, the loss of the ark, And the deaths of the priests who brought it, just complete devastation.
Utterly devastating. And it forces us to confront the central lesson here.
Which is?
The Israelites were relying on a symbol, an object, the ark, as if it were a magic talisman. They thought its mere physical presence guaranteed God's help.
But they missed the point.
Completely. As the source puts it, the people were caught up in a symbol of God's presence and did not realize that the box they had lost was empty.
Empty. Meaning God's presence wasn't actually with it in the way they assumed.
Precisely. God wasn't tied to the box. His presence wasn't guaranteed just because the ark was on the battlefield, especially when the people's hearts and actions weren't aligned with him. He wasn't trapped in it, waiting to be captured.
That phrase, the empty box, is really striking. It paints such a clear picture.
It does. Something that looks important, sacred even on the outside, but it lacks the true spiritual substance within.
And the source draws a parallel, suggesting this can happen even today. Institutions or practices that look right externally.
But might lack the genuine spirit of God inside? It's a sobering thought.
It really makes you pause and think, doesn't it? What are the potential empty boxes in our own lives or spiritual practices? Things we rely on externally.
Without ensuring that genuine internal connection with God is actually there? Are we trusting in rituals, buildings, leaders, or in God himself?
It's about the substance, not just the symbol.
Exactly. The symbol points to the reality, but it can never replace it.
Okay, so back in Shiloh, Eli is waiting for news. How does he hear about this catastrophe?
He's apparently sitting by the road, just waiting. The text says specifically, his heart feared for the ark of God. That seems to be his primary concern.
More than his sons, even.
The text emphasizes his fear for the ark. It suggests where his focus was, perhaps highlighting the priestly responsibility he felt, but maybe also his own anxieties.
Then a messenger arrives, a Benjamite.
Yes, and he's clearly bringing bad news, torn clothes, dust on his head, the whole picture of defeat and mourning.
He reports the rout, the huge casualties, the deaths of Hophni and Phinehas.
Eli hears all of that, but it's the final piece of news that delivers the fatal blow.
The ark.
When the messenger says, "And the ark of God has been captured," that's the moment.
What happens to Eli?
He's sitting on his chair by the gate, and when he hears the ark is captured, he falls backward.
Just collapses.
Falls backward off the chair. And because he was old 98, the text says, and heavy, the fall breaks his neck and he dies.
Wow. After leading Israel for 40 years, his end comes tied directly to the loss of the ark.
A tragic end, underscoring the weight of the events and perhaps the consequences of his earlier leniency with his sons and the state of the priesthood.
But the tragedy doesn't even end there, does it? There's still Eli's daughter-in-law.
Phinehas' wife, yes. She's pregnant, very near childbirth.
And she hears the news, too.
She hears it all. The capture of the ark, the death of her father-in-law, Eli, and the death of her husband, Phinehas.
That's unimaginable shock and grief.
And it sends her into premature labor. She gives birth to a son.
But she's dying as she gives birth.
Yes. And in her final moments, as the women around her try to comfort her, saying, "Don't despair, you have given birth to a son," she doesn't respond.
She has one final act.
She names the child. She calls him Ichabod.
Ichabod. What does that mean?
She explains it herself. The glory has departed from Israel.
The glory has departed.
She ties it directly to the ark's capture and the deaths. Because of the capture of the ark of God and the deaths of her father-in-law and her husband, she repeats it for emphasis. The glory has departed from Israel, for the ark of God has been captured.
Her words just hang there. It captures the absolute depth of the loss felt. Not just a military defeat, but something profoundly spiritual.
It's the heart of the matter. The perceived departure of God's own glory from their midst because of their actions and the subsequent capture of the ark.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into 1 Samuel 4, the main takeaway seems crystal clear.
It really does. It's a powerful lesson about the nature of faith and relationship with God.
It's not about the external stuff, the rituals, the objects. Not really. Not in isolation, anyway.
No, true connection isn't automatically guaranteed by those things. It's about genuinely seeking God's guidance, aligning our hearts and actions with His will.
Relying on the substance, not just the symbol. Ensuring the box isn't empty.
Exactly. This whole account is a stark warning against mistaking outward forms for inner reality. It prompts us to look at our own lives.
Right. To examine where our trust is really placed. Are we, maybe unknowingly, relying on some empty boxes?
That's the question to leave with, isn't it? What symbols or practices might we be clinging to while potentially neglecting the vital living relationship they're meant to represent?
Something important to reflect on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.